Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to our channel, True Courtroom Stories. Today we've got an absolutely incredible story for you, one that really gets to the heart of what justice is all about. This is all based on some amazing research by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir. And hey, before we dive in, please do me a favor and subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends. It really helps us out. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to explore a pivotal moment in history, the story of how one man's bravery against a powerful state created a principle that, believe it or not, still protects you and me today. So let me ask you something right off the bat. Can a promise, an oath or a pledge that you're forced to make under threat, can that ever really be valid? It's a huge question, right? Well, the answer was hammered out centuries ago in this dramatic showdown, and you'll be amazed at how its echoes still shape our laws all over the world. All right, let's set the scene. Picture this. We're in 8th century Medina, and this isn't a peaceful time. The city is just buzzing with political tension and upheaval. You've got these new rulers, the Abbasids, and they're trying to cement their power. And they have one simple rule for everyone: absolute, unquestioning loyalty. So how are they going to get this loyalty? Well, they issued a royal decree. Everybody had to give what's called a bay'ah, which is basically a formal public pledge of allegiance to the ruler. But here's the kicker, and this is so important. This was not a friendly request. Nope. The state made it crystal clear they were ready and willing to use coercion, force, to get it. It was pledge your loyalty or else. And this is where our hero enters the story, a man named Imam Malik ibn Anas. Now, you gotta understand, this wasn't just some guy off the street. He was a giant, a legendary legal scholar, the founder of the Maliki school of thought. One of the most respected minds of his entire era. So, when the governor comes to him and demands that he publicly endorse this whole forced allegiance thing, well, you can just feel the tension. The stage was set for a monumental clash between principle and power. So what does Imam Malik do? Does he just quietly refuse? Absolutely not. He goes public. He issues a direct legal ruling that just blows a hole right through the state's entire strategy. He declared for all to hear that a forced oath is invalid in the eyes of Allah. Wow. Can you imagine the courage? This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a full-blown public challenge to their authority. And how do you think the authorities reacted to that? They were furious, absolutely enraged, because this wasn't just disobedience. This was the Imam Malik, this hugely respected figure, telling the whole world that their tactics were illegitimate. It completely undermined their campaign. There was no way they were going to let this slide. And the price he paid for his principles was incredibly high. They didn't just give him a warning. No, he was arrested. He was brutally beaten, so badly that his shoulders were dislocated. And then, to top it all off, they publicly humiliated him. The state wanted to make a gruesome example out of him, to show everyone the severe cost of defiance. But here's the most amazing part of the story. Even after all of that, after the horrific punishment, being physically broken and publicly shamed, Imam Malik did not back down. He refused to change his ruling. His commitment to principle, to the truth, was just stronger than his fear of the state. It was unbreakable. Let's just pause and be really clear about the central concept here. It's this idea of coercion. It's pretty simple. It's using force or threats to make someone do something against their will. And what Imam Malik's stand was declaring so powerfully was that any act you perform under coercion, whether it's legal or religious, is fundamentally illegitimate. It doesn't count. And it was right there, in that moment of incredible pain, that a timeless legal doctrine was forged. The principle that emerged from his suffering was simple, but revolutionary. Coercion invalidates legal commitment. A forced confession, a contract you're forced to sign, an oath made under threat, none of them can be considered valid. And this wasn't just a personal victory, it had a massive ripple effect. Imam Malik's unwavering stance became a cornerstone of Islamic criminal procedure. It ended up shaping the development of law for centuries, from North Africa all the way to Andalusia, which you might know as Islamic Spain. Now, you might be thinking, that's a great history lesson, but what does it have to do with me today? Well, everything. You can draw a straight line from Imam Malik's stand in Medina to the laws that protect us right now. The idea that a forced confession is invalid is the very heart of landmark rulings like Miranda v. Arizona in the US. It's enshrined in legal protections in countries like Pakistan today. The core idea is exactly the same, protecting the individual from the overwhelming power of the state. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? What's the bottom line? Imam Malik's story is this powerful, powerful reminder that a judge's highest duty is not always to serve the state. Sometimes their most important job is to protect human dignity against the power of the state. And that leaves us with a challenging question, one for our own time. Amid all the pressures we face today, from governments, from corporations, from society, where is that line between loyalty and integrity? And maybe more importantly, who has the courage to draw it?
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about a right that feels so incredibly modern, the right to remain silent. But what if I told you its real roots go back way, way further than you think? This is a pretty wild connection, inspired by research in the book True Courtroom Stories by Zahir Ahmad Mir. And trust me, it's a piece of history that's probably going to surprise you.
I mean, you know this line, right? We've all heard it a million times in movies, on TV shows. It's basically the soundtrack to every police drama ever made. It feels like such a solid cornerstone of our modern world, you know? A clear line in the sand.
So the question is, was this just invented out of thin air in the 20th century? Or is this idea that you can't be forced to speak against yourself part of a much older, much bigger conversation about what justice even means? As we're about to find out, the real story is way more interesting.
Okay, so to really unpack this, we have to start with the story most of us already know, the one that put those famous words on the map.
So picture it. The year is 1966. The U.S. Supreme Court makes a ruling that completely changes the game for policing in America, forever. This is the official textbook origin story for the rights that get read to suspects when they're arrested.
So what was the big problem the court was trying to solve? Well, it all boiled down to this one phrase, the coerced confession. Basically, it's when someone admits to something not because they actually want to, but because they're being pressured or threatened or just plain forced. A confession without real consent? Well, that's not much of a confession at all.
And the court's ruling on this was crystal clear. They said, look, if a confession is squeezed out of somebody, it is legally worthless. You cannot use it as evidence, period. And that was a massive statement about putting limits on the power of the state.
And to actually make this ruling stick, the court created a practical safeguard, a toolkit really, and that's what we now call the Miranda Rights. These are the things that are meant to protect a person from being coerced. The right to shut up, the right to call a lawyer, and the right to not accidentally dig your own grave, legally speaking. It's a shield.
So, there you have it. That's the story from 1966. A modern solution to a modern problem, right? Well, not so fast. What if I told you the very core of this idea echoes a legal principle from over 1,200 years earlier, from a totally different part of the world?
Yeah, you heard that right. We're going to hop in a time machine and go all the way back to the 8th century to meet this man, Imam Malik. Now, he wasn't just some random guy. He was a giant in Islamic legal history, a founder of a whole school of law that's still influential today. And, believe it or not, he was dealing with a very similar problem.
Now, he wasn't focused on criminal confessions. The issue for him was people being forced to take oaths or pledges against their will. But his core principle, it was identical. If someone is forced to do something, that action has no legal effect. It's totally invalid. Sound familiar?
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. Let's put these two legal moments, separated by more than 1,000 years and thousands of miles, right next to each other.
The context, of course, is a little different. U.S. law was looking at police interrogations, Imam Malik was looking at political pledges. But the underlying question is exactly the same. Can a statement that's made under duress, under force, ever be considered legally binding? And this table just lays out the parallels so clearly. Imam Malik refused to accept forced pledges. The Miranda court refused to accept forced confessions. Imam Malik's rule was no legal effect under coercion. The Miranda rule was, pretty much, no confession under compulsion. In both situations, the goal was to protect the individual's dignity and rights from the power of the state. It's uncanny. So what's the big takeaway here? What does this incredible parallel tell us? Well, when you strip away all the details, the different times, the different cultures, the different legal jargon, you're left with this one powerful, universal idea about what justice actually is. And it's this. True justice absolutely demands voluntary consent. It doesn't matter if it's a confession to a crime or a pledge of allegiance. If it isn't given freely, it has no legal weight, no moral meaning. This isn't just an American idea or an Islamic one. It seems to be a fundamental requirement for any system that actually values human dignity. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
What other ideas that we think of as modern cornerstones of our world are actually just echoes from the past, rediscovered over and over again? This incredible connection, highlighted in Zahir Ahmed Mir's research, is a powerful reminder that the search for justice is a very, very old story.
Okay, let me ask you something. When you really think about it, what's the single most important rule for a fair trial? I mean, if you strip everything else away, what's left? It's a huge question, and it gets right to the heart of what justice even means. And we're about to explore a really powerful answer. So where are we getting all this from? Well, the insights for today's explainer are pulled from the book True Courtroom Stories, which is based on the research of Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir. And through his work, we're going to unpack a legal principle that, honestly, defines what makes a justice system just in the first place. And you know, the author, Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir, he's got a really unique perspective. We're talking about a constitutional and corporate lawyer who's written over 55 books. So yeah, his research gives us this incredible lens to look at how the law actually works. So let's get right into the first big idea. We're going to start with a specific legal concept from Pakistan's courts called the inadmissibility rule. Now, this is all about what makes a confession legit in court, and trust me, it's way more fundamental than you might think. So, what does this rule actually say? It's pretty straightforward. The courts there have been incredibly consistent on three main things. First, if a confession is forced, it's inadmissible. Gone. Thrown out. Second, any evidence that comes from police torture is automatically invalid. And third, and this is the absolute core of it, a confession must be completely and totally voluntary to even be looked at by a court. Right, but this isn't just some theory written down in a dusty law book. Let's take a look at how this idea was really locked into place in the real world, all thanks to a landmark case. The case you need to know is Abdul Majeed versus the state. This ruling from the Supreme Court became this incredibly powerful precedent, basically cementing why this inadmissibility rule is so important. And the court's statement from this case, it is just so direct and powerful. Quote, involuntary confessions cannot be the basis of conviction. Just think about that. There's no wiggle room, no gray area. It's saying you simply cannot build a conviction on a foundation of force. It's a hard line in the sand. But that kind of leads us to the bigger question, doesn't it? Why? Why is this rule so absolute? This next part really gets to the philosophical soul of this whole legal idea. So to get the why, we need to know a little bit of legal speak. The term is ratio decidendi, and all that really means is the core reasoning, the fundamental idea that a court's whole decision is built on. It's not just what they decided, it's the reason why they decided it. And this is the ratio decidendi right here. This is the big reason. The court basically argued that the whole point of law is to protect human dignity. But here's the thing. Dignity is destroyed by force, by coercion. The two just can't exist in the same space. And what that means is that any legal process that uses force is actually violating the very purpose of the law itself. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. What's the ultimate lesson here? Because this principle from Pakistani law gives us a really powerful universal takeaway about what justice is really all about. And here it is. This is the central lesson from Mr. Mir's research. A legal system can only call itself just when it absolutely refuses to get to the truth by using force. Because in a system that's truly fair, how you find the truth is every bit as important as the truth itself. Which leaves us with one last pretty deep question to think about. If a statement, even one that's factually correct, is pulled out of someone using force, does it still have the moral weight of being the truth? Or does the act of forcing it out corrupt it into something else entirely? It's a question that really makes you stop and think about what we want justice